Hello golfers, Owen here from the JD Golf Academy at Drayton Golf Club in Oxfordshire. Just a quick video today. We're going to be talking about the relationship between the rib cage and the pelvis in terms of lateral movement. Okay, so in terms of sway. So we're going to jump on to Gears Golf here because it's a little bit easier to see the visual of it. And I've highlighted here an average tour pro. So this is sort of an amalgamation of all of the tour pros who've been on Gears. And it sort of combines them all together, so it sort of builds us like a tour average that we can use, so we can see sort of as close as we can get to like a perfect swing really. So we can see that in here. I've got a little graph going on at the bottom here, and you can see on the visual of the screen we've got a couple of things highlighted. So what we've got highlighted here is the rib cage sway and the pelvis sway. Okay, so that relates to throughout the swing how their rib cage and how their pelvis is moving laterally. Okay, it's on the graph here to see a little bit. We'll go into that in a bit more detail in a second. So what's really interesting to see, we're going to look at the backswing to start with, and in the backswing you can see here on this graph these two lines never really get too separated away from each other. So this first dotted line here represents the top of the backswing, and we can see there's never any real separation between those two lines. What that means is that the pelvis and the rib cage, which the best ball strikers in the world will always start behind the ball, as that moves back, their pelvis and their rib cage will sort of sway together. Okay, so there's that little offset, there's that little lateral movement back following the club, and they will always sort of stay together. You can see on the visual here, the two dots that represent the pelvis and the rib cage, they sort of always stay stacked on top of each other, so they're sort of moving as one. What that means is that we never ever really get into a position where we're going to get out controlling the downswing, where we're sort of in danger of either the hip sliding or the rib cage sliding, or having to back up and lean back and chicken wing. There's all sorts of messy things that can happen when those two become disassociated in the backswing. We'll talk a little bit about the downswing in a second because they do sort of separate a little bit on the downswing. But that there sets up a really nice position. You can see that the golf will sort of sway back a little bit and then will recenter towards the ball, going up to the top of the swing. Okay, so here's where we sort of see a real difference between the tour pros and the amateurs. So that's on the downswing. So what we can start to see here is just before impact, sort of P6 in the swing, when the hands are sort of hip height, is the pelvis will keep swaying and keep going in front of the ball and keep leading through, and the rib cage will start to follow it until the hands sort of get here in the swing. Okay, then what starts to happen is the rib cage will actually back up a little bit. Okay, and the pelvis sort of keeps going. Okay, so those two parts that have sort of moved together now on the downswing will start to back up a little bit. Okay, so the rib cage here, as you can see, down into impact will actually offset a little bit. Okay, it starts to move backwards. So in that mid-down position, the rib cage here, you can see he's swaying. He's 3.2 inches closer to target than when he started laterally. And you can see going down into impact, he's 2.6, okay? So he's lost best part of an inch going down into impact from that sort of mid-down position into impact. Reasons why he wants to do this is it's all to do with the timing. So we've spoken a little bit about hand speed in previous videos. We talk about sort of braking force quite a lot, and it all sort of links up with that, and we can sort of see there is a direct relationship as to when the hands sort of slow down and when the vertical force, when the amount of pressure going into the ground peaks. There's a correlation there as to when the rib cage backs up. So we're going to touch very lightly, because this is a whole new video in itself, we're going to touch very lightly on the amount of lift that the golfer has. Okay, so when we're talking about lift, we're talking about that movement up and down. Okay, so I'm just going to highlight it here on the left so you can see it. What we will start to see is that obviously as the golfer goes down, they're losing height. Okay, they're going into the ball, they're putting pressure into the ground as they do that. So they go into it and they'll sort of peak out around here, this golfer does. Okay, around there in the rib cage, okay? And you can see that's very soon after they put that maximum amount of pressure into the ground and they're really sinking and losing height into the ground. Very soon after that, the rib cage sort of backs up. That's where they're sort of jumping at the ball and they're slowing their hands down and they're jumping out at the ball just to make sure they've got the maximum amount of force, the maximum amount of energy transferring into the club head and then ultimately the golf ball. Without that, if they keep going and going and going, they lose so much efficiency in the strike and they don't get that sort of snap that we've spoken about in the braking force. So you can see there on the rib cage sway, as that rib cage sway starts to go downwards on the graph, or if you want to look at the visual, as it starts to back up away from the target, on the lift side of things, you can see they're actually gaining height. So they're gaining height, they're jumping up out of the ground, they're transferring the energy into the golf ball, but they're also giving the golf club room to work as well. And then they go down into impact and they nearly gain an inch in height so that they can fully release the club, they can fully have room to strike the golf ball in and deliver a really efficient, really effective, powerful strike. That there is maximum efficiency at work. That's how you would swing it. If you could go maximum efficiency, that there is a really, really neat and tidy way of doing it. It's something that's so hard to sequence. It's something that we try and tidy up a lot, the pelvis and the ribcage sway. We do this a lot in lessons here at JD Golf Academy because it's such a key thing in maintaining a good strike.